Hey there, everyone. Welcome in. This is the Charles Jackson, author of the Boxing Encyclopedia, and I've been waiting for this one. This is my tier list ranking the Rocky franchise. If you look down there, you see I got some specialities in there too. But let me first tell you how my ranking goes. We're going to jump straight into it. C at the bottom, I'm going to say is below average. B is about average. A is pretty good. S is great. And Z is the best of the best. Please do remember this list is only my opinion, and I'm going to be very brief with my covering of the films too. I'll show you a little footage. But again, a disclaimer again, because some people just can't take this. It's subjective, and I'd like to see your list too. I will link the list in the pinned comment and probably in the description too. I did not make this particular tier list, but I did add some images to it. Okay, let's dive in. Up first is the original film. I know for many people this is the best of the best, and I'm actually willing to admit that the original Rocky film is the best in the franchise if we're looking at things from a filmmaking standpoint. The writing, it did win Best Picture after all. It was the one that catapulted Sly's career. Let me tell you a little bit about the first Rocky. And it's very inspiring to me as a filmmaker too, because you've always got to bet on yourself in this life, and that's just what Sly did. And I'd say it more than paid off, wouldn't you? The original Rocky film is probably the ultimate underdog story. It's a Cinderella story. There's a guy, 30 years old, really kind of down and out. His life is going nowhere. And then he receives the opportunity of a lifetime, and he capitalizes on it. His only goal was to go the distance with heavyweight champion of the world, Apollo Creed, who was clearly, very clearly inspired by real life Muhammad Ali. He's played by Carl Weathers. May he rest in peace. Just passed away last year. It's a great film, top to bottom. It's full of heart. All the performances checking. Burt Young as Paulie, Talia Shire as Adrian, and so on. You can go up and down the list. However, for me personally, when it comes to the original Rocky, in comparison to the rest of the franchise, as far as which ones I go back to rewatch value, it's hovering here somewhere. I recognize that this film is the best in the franchise from a filmmaking standpoint. I'm a filmmaker myself. I'm going to place it in S for now. I may change my mind later. Let's move on to Rocky 2. Me personally, I prefer Rocky 2 to the original. I think the heart is still there from the original, and it's cranked up a bit. It's more exciting. At least the fight in the end is. Some people feel the film gets a little slow during the middle. I don't personally agree. I enjoy it the whole way through. Rocky and Adrian get married. You get a recap of the first film too, which was pretty well done, and then it bleeds directly into the events of this film, with Apollo not being able to let go, that Rocky took him the distance when no one else had before, even though at the end of the original film, he said, ain't gonna be no rematch. So, I mean, hey, people do flip on a dime like that. It's realistic. It's not a problem for me. I think it's covered pretty well too, with Apollo being desperate to get Rocky back in the ring and Rocky's manhood being questioned. He's got a kid on the way too. Adrian goes into a coma during childbirth or directly after childbirth. He struggles in his training. He has to learn to fight right-handed because of his bad eye from the first film and the beating he took. Overall, I really enjoy it. It's my second favorite film in the franchise, as a matter of fact. That could change in the coming years, and I'll get into that later. But that being said, Rocky 2 is definitely an S tier for me, and I'm going to put it ahead of the first Rocky here. That's just for me personally. Let's move on to Rocky 3. Rocky 3. The story of the eye of the tiger, getting your edge back in life. Some of you who are middle-aged, perhaps, probably have experienced a point in your life where you're like, do I have it anymore? And you may get beat down, but the question is, will you get back up? And I think this film covers that perfectly. I remember someone said a while back, a little bit off topic, that The Dark Knight Rises, the third film in the Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy, is Rocky 3. And it is, if you really look at the framing of it, right? You got the guy on top, kinda, and he loses it all. He lost his edge. He used to be tough and rough as nails, but he became civilized when he made it to the top. It actually kind of reminds me of Jack Dempsey as well here in the boxing world. and then he gets beat down, he loses it, and he's going to quit, but then he's brought back. And the one who incites the resurrection of Rocky, poetic enough, crazy enough, is the very man whom he ended. He ended his time at the top. He dragged him down. That's probably not the right thing to say, dragged him down. But it's Apollo Creed, the antagonist from the first two films, who was never really a bad guy. He's just the antagonist because he opposes the protagonist, Rocky. Very well done. Soundtrack is fire. And I didn't mention the soundtrack from the first two films, but I don't think I need to. Honestly, at this point, y'all know the Rocky music is fire. With that being said, with Rocky 3, I remember when I was a kid, and I said this in the 1982 timeline, that I thought Rocky 3 ended with Rocky losing to Clubber Lang in the first fight, because I would never see the movie go forward for whatever reason. Like, I'd stop watching, or I'd have to leave someone's house or whatever. Speaking of Clubber Lang, played by Mr. T, excellent follow-up antagonist to Apollo Creed. And this guy is probably actually a bad guy. This dude is no joke. He's stronger than Apollo. He's not as good of a boxer as Apollo, but he's certainly a grander antagonist. This guy really makes it personal, too, with the whole saying that Adrian can come by to his apartment and he's been watching Rocky and he loses respect for Rocky. You can see that in the opening montage as Rocky loses the eye of the tiger, but Clubber becomes hungrier. Seeing Rocky and Apollo bond and form a brotherhood, and then the final fight's awesome, too. Honestly, the movie did the impossible, because the third movie usually sucks. This one's darn good, man. It might even be the best in the franchise. I know there's a lot of people who really like Rocky 3. I used to not be one of them. I am now one of them. I love Rocky 3. And as I said again in the 1982 timeline, Rocky 3, the older I get myself, I'm not going to tell you how old I am right now, but the older I get myself, this movie honestly shoots up. It may pass up Rocky 2. Actually, let me think about that right now. I definitely have Rocky 3 above Rocky. Do I have it above Rocky 2? Yes. You know what? I'm going to put it above Rocky 2 as well. That's another S-tier movie, man. If you've never seen Rocky 3 or Rocky 2 or the original Rocky or any of these films in this franchise, I don't know why you're watching this list just yet. You should go watch those and then come right back to this list. Please don't leave. Leave the tab open. But that's where I'm going to put Rocky 3 for now. So it's in the lead. Alright. You already know what's up here. Rocky 4. Before I even get into it, we know what's up already, right? If you know me, if you know the author of the Boxing Encyclopedia, this is my movie right here. Like this is not just at the top of this franchise. Like, this is at the top. It's probably in my top 5 or 10 of my favorite movies, period. Rocky 4 is a comic book movie, which to some people ruins it for them because of the franchise that it's in. Compare this film to this film, the original heart-filled, very humble film. A lot of people are turned off. The movie takes what Rocky 3 started with, becoming more action-oriented, and just cranks it up to 11. The antagonist, Ivan Drago, is somehow even more cartoonishly devastating than Clubber Lang was. Lang was loud and brash and strong. Drago is like the Terminator. That's probably why I like this movie so much too, because I love Arnold Schwarzenegger as much as I love Sylvester Stallone. And Dolph Lundgren's performance as Ivan Drago feels like the Terminator in a boxing setting. Let's talk about this film very briefly. It opens with a recap of Rocky getting his edge back and beating Clubber Lang, and then it transitions to the sparring match between Rocky and Apollo at the end of Rocky 3. We find out who won that in the first Creed, but we'll wait until we get there for me to tell you that. And then the movie is on Paulie's birthday. They celebrate. It's also Rocky and Adrian's 9th anniversary of them being married. The Russians come to America to put their hand into the boxing pit, or whatever I'm trying to say there. And this guy, who's never had a professional bout, is really billed. Apollo decides to come out of retirement and humble him. And His whole message in this movie is how you can't change who you are. You're a warrior. It honestly kind of reminds me of Dragon Ball Z. Like, it feels like I'm listening to Vegeta talk. I am a Saiyan warrior, the Saiyan prince. When I listen to Apollo talk in this movie about how you can't change what's inside the warrior. It's who you are. You have to feed that beast. Again, very Vegeta-like, the prince of all Saiyans, Kakarot. And then Drago kills him in the ring. Big spoiler alert there. I remember watching this movie for the first time. I was at my Grams' house. It was a Friday. Again, in the 1985 timeline, I detailed this. The movie just blew my mind. I was like, what? There's a Rocky 4? So Apollo is ended by Drago. Rocky takes it into his hands. He's like, nah, I can't let that slide. He's going to have to kill me too. And he embraces what Apollo said, that he is a warrior and he's coming back. This is despite him having retired after Clubber Lang, and he retired as champion. And the Russians already wanted to fight Rocky. He gives in here. He's like, yeah, I'm going to fight him. And Adrian's all like, nah, it's suicide. You can't do that. He says, nah, to beat me, he's going to have to kill me. Rocky goes to Russia. Actually, scratch that. No, before he goes to Russia, we get No Easy Way Out. Probably my favorite montage in movie history. I said probably. I probably have to think about some other movies there. And speaking of montages, a lot of people don't like this film too because it feels like a music video, right? There's like 4 or 5 montages in this film. That's not a problem for me. I actually think that's a part of the film's charm. Then we get to Russia. Rocky trains. There are hints throughout the film too that Drago is enhanced by steroids, and then we actually see it in one of the final montages. Adrian does decide to come support Rocky. She comes to Russia. There's 2 training montages. And then the final fight is just somehow so fire. I love when something more than lives up to the hype, right? Like the first Muhammad Ali-Joe Frazier fight, that more than lived up to the hype, the fight of the century. LeBron James's NBA career more than lived up to the hype. He surpassed the hype. Rocky versus Drago blows the hype out of the water. I don't care if you got to say, no, it's true and you know it is. It blows it out the water. It's very exciting. The punch sounds are insane, very comic book like. The swinging of the momentum during the film is amazing. During the final fight, is amazing. And the war montage, fire, inspirational for other filmmakers. And Sly's in the best shape he's been in too. Like, he already trimmed down and became super lean for Rocky 3 as compared to, he was a bit more bulky in Rocky 1 and 2, like, and a bit flatter, then became cut in Rocky 3. In this one, he brings back some of that bulk with the lean and cutness from Rocky 3, and he's in the best shape he's been in for all 4 of these movies. It's amazing. Final fight's awesome. And then he ends the Cold War after, too. And then the movie ends. It's honestly awesome, man. Like, I kind of just spoiled it all for you, but if you haven't seen Rocky 4, you got to go make that happen. Watch the movies in order, too. So Rocky 4, definitely an S. Let's move on to its director's cut. Rocky versus Drago, the director's cut. First and foremost, the intro of the film is changed into a full-scale recap of Rocky 3. There are some things that are nixed, like the gloves clashing in the beginning of Rocky 4 is gone. You don't see the spar between Rocky and Apollo. There's no Paulie's birthday, no Rocky and Adrian's anniversary, and no robot, which I thought was pretty cool. It didn't need to necessarily be cut. The overall tone of the film is shifted to being more so like the original 2 films. It's a bit more serious, right? Which I don't think works as well because Rocky 3 already shifted in the more comic book, action-oriented direction. And I think there was some overcompensation, with this. But, I mean, hey, I'm not the creator. Overall, it's Sly's decision. With that being said, there are more scenes in this director's cut that build up Rocky and Apollo's brotherhood. I thought that was already well done anyway. That I appreciate the extra scenes because it's more Rocky. Hallelujah. I think Rocky 3 did a nice job showing that. And overall, it does contribute to the tragedy with Drago going over far worse too. And there's a lot of alternate cuts in this one too that are in place of the theatrical scenes. Some like that's something that I didn't find too captivating because I preferred the original scenes. I thought they were better choices as far as the flow of the film. Apollo's funeral's expanded. We get that scene that was originally only in the trailer where the boxing commission stripped Rocky because they don't want him to fight Drago. And Ivan Drago himself is probably the biggest change in the movie. He talks a lot more in this one, which some may argue that strips him of his Terminator aura or whatever I'm trying to say, and it makes him less menacing. This cut of the film, this Rocky versus Drago, this director's cut, it humanizes Drago as more so of a man who's thirsty for glory and greatness. That's something that's hinted at in the original. The biggest example being before the final round of the final fight at the end of the movie, where Drago says he fights for himself after holding up that one guy with one arm like and dropped him in the crowd. Anyway, the final fight itself too has some changes. The punches are more realistic. There's different scene cuts that show Rocky getting in a bit more offense before he lands that big right hook in round 2, amongst other things too. The knockout at the end of the fight is a completely different cut, and it no longer has a count. Drago is just waved off. He's knocked out. I think that's a pretty cool change. It really shows what Rocky did to him, especially after how many times he himself got to get up, but the referee was like, yeah, no, Drago's done. And now perhaps the biggest change outside of Drago himself is that Rocky does not end the Cold War in this cut. The Russian citizens do cheer him at the end as he more so addresses Apollo in his ending speech. But the Politburo, the Russian Politburo, leaves in anger and disgrace, which I think is more realistic, makes more sense. It works, sure. And Eye of the Tiger plays us out in this cut as opposed to Hearts on Fire. I like both, honestly. That works too. And honestly with you too, if I'm being honest with you, there's like way more changes that you yourself should check out. I can't cover them all here and remain brief and keep up my brevity. Make sure you're familiar with the theatrical cut of the film before you watch this one. I do recommend it, at least for a one-time watch, but for me personally, I am more of a theatrical cut guy. That's my final verdict. I prefer the theatrical cut of Rocky IV to this one. There's very little of the changes that were made that I found necessary or enjoyed. And one of these days, I'm probably going to go through and make a best of both worlds cut between this and the theatrical cut. So overall, I would say this movie is good because it's still Rocky IV, but it's not in the S tier. Let's talk about the black sheep now. This is Rocky V, the one everybody loves to hate. Something off the bat with Rocky V is the hip hop score. Me personally, I like rap, and I understand the time period that this was released, the New Jack Swing boom, but I don't think it worked too well. That was something that bogged the film down. Rocky V is a film that tries to get back to the roots. So the first film and the second film, more humble, Rocky loses his fortune and move back to the old neighborhood. All the riches are gone. And that's Paulie's fault, by the way, too, with the power of attorney crap. The opening recap of Rocky IV, the Rocky versus Drago fight, is awesome. The recap itself is worth looking at. And Rocky has to retire, too, because of brain damage. Union Kane was supposed to be his challenger, which, I mean, I thought Rocky was stripped of the title in Rocky IV, wasn't he? Like, for fighting Drago? So how is he the champion? How does he have to fight Union? I don't know, but maybe someone will explain that in the comments. But overall, he has to retire. They're out of money. He takes on a pupil, Tommy Gunn, played by real-life boxer Tommy Morrison, who you can check out in a timeline of the 1990s heavyweight boxing division here on BoxingPedia. I covered Tommy's career in full there, and a little bit in the 2000s timeline as well. And I actually think Tommy Morrison did a nice job in the role. For him to be an athlete and not be an actor at all, he did swell. Pretty darn well, in my opinion. Compare that with, and I'm not trying to take shots at him, but Antonio Tarver in the next film, and I think Tommy Morrison clears him, no question about it. Getting back on track. It's a story of a mentor and a student, and how the student is ultimately absorbed into riches, perhaps even greed. The evil George Washington Duke, who's clearly inspired by Don King, and he turns on Rocky, and then they have a street fight in the end instead of a fight in the ring. And it's pretty darn cool, I've got to say. There's flashbacks to Mickey, who, by the way, passed in Rocky III. I forgot to mention that. That's a huge part of that film. And overall, I think the film is okay. It's not F tier, and I don't even have an F here, but it's not even, it's not a bad film. Like, this is an average film, right? Sure, Sly himself doesn't like it. However, in comparison to the rest of the franchise, I'm going to give it average. Not necessarily good, it's okay. It's just such a drop in morale and feel from this film here, from Rocky 4. Let's move on to the Rocky 5 work print. You have probably heard me mention before that the Rocky 5 work print is perhaps on par with the first 4 films. Let's talk about it. Let me talk to you. The hip-hop soundtrack that I don't personally like from Rocky 5 is gone. It's replaced with the classic Bill Conti score. That's a big change already, in my opinion. That makes the film better from the jump. There's minor dialogue changes in scenes that didn't make the final cut. The intro recap of Rocky vs. Drago, which I really enjoyed in the theatrical cut, is now more raw. It throws you into the den with Rocky, with the Russian fans cheering. There's no music, and with the big shots that Drago lands on Rocky, there's like freeze frame shots. It's pretty darn good still. Here's a pretty big scene, a big addition to this film. You remember Little Marie from the first film? The little girl that Rocky walked home and warned her that she needed to get her life together or she was going to wind up a bum. There's a scene in this film where Rocky's warning came to fruition. She winds up as a homeless prostitute, and she's even played by the same lady as well, too. However, due to Rocky Balboa, this scene can't be canon any way you look at it. We'll get to that down the line. There's some further context around some other scenes too, like when Rocky is now shown to get drunk before he goes into mixed gym and has that flashback to him. The final fight also has a change, and this is pretty big, where Mickey is more to the point in his hype job from the great beyond. And the big notable thing is that after Rocky beats Tommy, instead of abandoning him like he did in the original and walking off triumphant, he lends his hand out to him. He extends his hand. He offers him still his friendship, still his guidance. I forgive you. Let's turn over a new leaf together. And Tommy takes his hand. He accepts it and acknowledges that he was wrong. With just that handshake. He doesn't verbally say he was wrong, but him taking Rocky's hand does all the talking. I think that was awesome. Forgiveness, I've said this before, and I think the 1997 timeline, because I was talking about Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe and how forgiveness is for one's self. It's not for the other person. Now, I've had to do that too, especially this past year in 2024. I had someone that I had to forgive for me. So when I see that message in a film like that, it's really reaffirming. It's awesome, and you should all remember that too. Forgiveness is for you. We don't know what happened with Rocky and Tommy after the movie, but I think that's enough there. Overall, I think the tone is closer to the original 2 films, especially the very first, the original, and it brings the franchise full circle. In most ways, I do find the work print better than the theatrical cut, and I think it's on par with the rest of the franchise, if not slightly off. If you would like to watch the work print of Rocky 5, you can find it online. That's all I'm going to tell you. Its ranking, it's B. It's definitely better than the theatrical cut. We're going to put it in B for now. I'll make my mind up in the end on everything finally. Let's move on to Rocky Balboa, 16 years after Rocky 5. I remember being so juiced when the announcement for this movie came out because I couldn't stand that Rocky 5 was the end. My mother loves Rocky 5 for her own reasons, so I would get a lot of enjoyment out of watching it with her. Like, she really likes a George Washington Duke character. But Rocky Balboa is Sly's next turn around the block, like, nah, we're going to set that straight, what happened with Rocky 5. And damn, does he deliver, in my opinion. This movie is right back to this movie, the original. It feels just about the same. It's been 16 years. Rocky's older. I think he's about 60 years old now. Adrian has passed, which was a real gut puncher. I covered this movie in the 2006 timeline, I believe. in my heavyweight timeline. You can check that out, of course. I recommend it. The movie is once again an underdog story like the original. As a matter of fact, some may even consider it a remake of the original in some ways. Little Marie returns, but she's played by a different actress, and she did not go down the path that Rocky warned her of. So this is canon. The Rocky V work print is not. That's why I said this earlier. And she's a very nice supporting character. She supports Rocky when he ultimately decides he wants to fight again. Rocky's son, Robert, now played by a different actor as well, and not by Sage Stallone, Sly's actual son from Rocky V. He's against it at first too. Actually, everybody's against it first. They're like, dude, oh man, you're crazy. The antagonist of the film, which it almost feels unfair to call him, Mason Dixon, played by Antonio Tarver, has his own character arc too. All he's been told is how he is not a champion on par with the greats of the past. Does that sound familiar? Yes, it does. Not just for that time period with, say, the Klitschko's, in particular Vladimir, but with every athlete that shows up and dominates a scene after the previous champion. This always happens. It happened to Muhammad Ali, right? Like, and he's considered the greatest by many. It happened to Rocky Marciano. The list goes on, right? So that's very, very good writing, in my opinion, to adapt that into a boxing film, to where the character arc of the villain is also there. I don't think we had that since Rocky 2 with Apollo, where he had that arc of Rocky must fall. I have to avenge myself. Nobody goes the distance with me. And Mason Dixon is out to prove himself too in a lose-lose situation. He's fighting an old man. If he beats him, congrats, you beat an old man. If he loses to him, wow, we were right, you're a loser. Right? It's lose-lose for him. Kind of reminds me of Larry Holmes with that fight against Muhammad Ali. But the less said about that fight, the better. Anyway, darn good film from top to bottom. I won't say much more else on it. This movie, which I remember seeing in theaters around Christmas time back then, I think it's 2006. I'm going to place it in S tier. I will reshape these in the end. Again, let's move on now. The franchise went dormant. This was the perfect end. Rocky even disappears in the final shot. Perfect end. And then it came back with a spinoff. Creed. I remember being pumped for this. I was like, Rocky's back? Okay, for sure, but he can't be fighting, right? And he's not. He's the mentor again, like in Rocky 5, but they get that right this time too. So Adonis Creed is Apollo Creed's illegitimate son. Some people don't like that. Some people are like, Apollo would never cheat on Mary Beth. What the suck? Why would you do that? I have to contrast. I have to contend that. Apollo seemed to really be going through a heavy midlife crisis in Rocky IV, where he was like, I'm still a warrior, I still got it. Honestly, it's not very far-fetched for me personally to believe that he would step out on his wife. It's not. I personally think that's in line with the character at that point of his life. People do that. So Adonis is his illegitimate son. Mary Beth takes him in as a boy. We time skip to the future, where he's got an office job, but he knows he wants more. He knows he can do more. He knows what his passion is, because he fights on the side too. He quits his job. He goes and he seeks out Rocky in Philly, because he lived in LA. He goes cross country to Philly, finds Rocky, convinces him to train him, and he gets an opportunity, like Rocky did back in the day, to fight Pretty Ricky Conlon, I believe it is. Rocky tells him straight up, he's like, dude, like, they're picking you because you're easy. But they take the fight anyway. They train for it. Donnie falls in love over time with, I can't remember her name right now. Alright, I got her name, Bianca. Man, I'm tripping by not remembering her name. But let's keep going forward. Their love story, to me, felt very organic. It was awesome. And the movie flows really well. The pacing's great. It's good to see Rocky back, right? All these years after Rocky Balboa. And after he got rid of that beast that was inside of him, and how he's at peace. And unfortunately, Rocky gets sick too. I think he gets cancer in this movie, and he wants to quit. He's ready to join everybody because everybody's gone. Paulie's gone. Adrian's gone. He wants to join it, but Donnie makes him fight. So Rocky does have a fight in this movie, and him fighting does pay off. Ultimately, Donnie's fight with Pretty Ricky Collin, who's a real douche, by the way, is darn good. I love Donnie's entrance to the Hail Mary by Tupac. It's a good fight. It's got some real punches in there too, like they went above and beyond to make the fight good. And he doesn't win, but he does earn his respect, because one of Donnie's things in this movie too is that he doesn't want to be an Apollo shadow. He didn't even tell people that he was Apollo Creed's son, because when it comes out that he is, a Pretty Ricky Collin, for example, says, that's the only reason you're here, right? He's like, nah, man. Donnie's like, nah, man, I built my own way here. And he's like, yeah, please, daddy's boy. So, good movie. And I can't believe I took so long to watch it back then, too. I didn't see this one in theaters, unfortunately. I let it pass me by, but I ended up watching it in the lobby of my college dorm back then. And darn, I was like, let's go. Okay, that was good. Is there going to be another one? Yes, there is. But let me go ahead and rank the first Creed. I think the first Creed is pretty darn good. It's up here in S tier as well. Let's move on to Creed 2. Creed 2. First of all, I was pumped. I was like, let's go. We got a sequel. Cool. Of course, they had to make one. And they went the perfect direction. Creed 2 is a sequel, not only to the first Creed here, but to Rocky 4. It is addressed that Ivan Drago killed Apollo Creed because his son arrives on the scene with Drago himself too, with Ivan and his son Victor Drago. Again, Drago is very humanized in this film, and it really makes me think that this film is actually more so connected to Rocky versus Drago as opposed to the theatrical cut of Rocky 4. So which is canon? I don't know. I guess you can decide. But Creed 2 sees a time skip where Donnie has now moved up and he becomes the heavyweight champion of the world. He was a light heavyweight in the first movie. Overall, the film is another touch on forgiveness. Drago, after he lost to Rocky way back in 1985, his life went, I'm gonna just keep it a buck with you, it went to the shitter, man. He ended up having a son. His wife left him. He had to raise his son alone. And his wife is shown in this movie too, like to just be about the clout and success. And they actually got Bridget Nielsen, I believe, to come back and play the role. I hope I got her name right. If I did not, please forgive me. The film also feels a bit like Rocky 3 because Donnie and Victor Drago fight one time and Victor crushes him, but he gets disqualified, I think, because of how he did it. Like he hit after the bell, like or after he was stopped, after he was told to stop. It really busts Donnie up. And then when they fight again, Donnie's gone through some intense training and he gets the dub on him. And Drago, actually, how Donnie gets the dub on him is that Ivan Drago climbs into the ring and does what Rocky should have done way back in Rocky 4. You remember Duke screaming at Rocky to throw the towel in even though Apollo begged him not to? Ivan Drago throws in the towel to save his own son's life because Donnie was probably about to put him away for good. Because it was that personal like that, because he beat him up and his father ended his father. Very poetic. I loved it. In the end, when Donnie's celebrating, he wants Rocky to join him in the ring, and Rocky says, no, this is your time. I'm aware that there's a deleted scene for this film where Rocky and Ivan Drago fight in a hospital. It's not in the film, but darn, I think you can catch some footage of it on YouTube. I wish it had been in the film, but that's just me being a fan service. It didn't need to be in the film. The film flows very well. Overall, Creed 2, darn good, especially because of my love for Rocky 4. Yes, it goes up here as well. Pretty fun film. Also, am I forgetting, does Donnie's mother pass in this film or is it in Creed 3? I'm getting that a little confused right now. I don't remember. I should also say too that Donnie and Bianca have a daughter, and because Bianca has a hearing aid, like she has hearing issues, Their daughter, I believe, is born deaf. So she has to sign and they have to learn sign. I think that's a pretty nice aspect too, because Donnie wants to teach his daughter how to fight too. And she starts going along with it too, like she gets into trouble at school. But anyway, let's move on to the last film, the Creed 3. Diamond Damian Anderson. Creed 3 does the impossible. Rocky Balboa is not in this film. His saga apparently truly ended in the last one because he finally makes the trip up to Canada and he visits his estranged son, Robert. It's the last we see of Rocky, and he meets his grandchild. Now it's all about Donnie. The torch has been passed in full. Some people didn't like that. Some people protested that. Me being a huge fan of the Rocky franchise, I was skeptical at first, but guess what? They made it work. Creed 3, pretty darn good. So this one, now we go back into Donnie's past to when he was a boy, a very troubled youth. And he had a friend at the time, Damien, or Dame. And Dame took a fall for him. And he went to jail for an altercation that happened outside of a store. And Dame is now just getting out of prison all these years later. Dame shows up. Donnie doesn't really recognize him all that much at first, but then he does, and they reminisce. And, you know, Dame doesn't have anything to his name, so Donnie helps him out. And tensions in relations slowly boil and break down over time. A big fight is coming up, and Dame gets the opportunity because someone got hurt at a party beforehand, or like a press conference beforehand. Dame steps in and he fights really dirty to ultimately win and become the champion. I should also say by this time that Donnie has retired. Dame lets all that success go to his head, man. He turns on Donnie. He socked Donnie too at a party that he was having with a bunch of people who were clearly just there for the clout. I'm talking about Dame right now. Donnie comes out of retirement. He's got to train to fight Dame. This is a battle of brothers, and again, some Rocky 3 influence. A part of Donnie's training is with Victor Drago. He comes back, and they have a bit of a rubber match in their sparring. And it really begs the question, too, is Dame even tougher than Victor Drago was in the last movie? Right? I don't know. That's really up to you. But let's get to the final fight. And again, I don't remember if it's this film or the previous film where Donnie's mother, Mary Beth, passes away. But I'm just going to mention it anyway. The final fight is straight out of an anime. Whether it be Dragon Ball, Naruto, Hunter x Hunter, whatever. The final fight, it even has shots like that. The visuals. There's even a moment like where they zone out all the fans too, like and they're in a cage or whatever, and they punch each other at the same time, like how Naruto and Sasuke do, like in Goku and Vegeta. It is lit. If you're an anime fan, or even if you're not, it's awesome. Me personally, I think so. And ultimately, in the end, the two brothers come back together after Donnie does beat Dame. They meet in the locker room. They rekindle, like they make up. It's cool, like it's no bad blood. So overall, I think this movie did a very nice job of having to follow up two films that were clearly hinged upon the franchise's head, being Rocky. This one does not have Rocky. Turned a lot of people off. It did not turn me off. They pulled it off. This franchise does not need Rocky in it anymore. And that is the mark of a great movie and a great franchise, to where you can pass the baton, pass the torch. This movie is that film that proves it's still got plenty left in the tank. And I can't wait for Creed 4. I think there is going to be a Creed 4. A lot of people have been begging for Clubber Lang to somehow come back into the picture, with Deontay Wilder himself even saying he wants to play Clubber Lang's son. I think that's really cheesy. You can't take the son route again, because you did that with Drago, and for Drago it worked because of the history of the Creed and Drago names. I don't know. According to Sly, Clubber Lang became a preacher after he lost to Rocky, and he turned his life around. I don't know. Anyway, Creed 3's ranking, is it better than Creed 2? Arguably, actually, yes. And the Rumble in the Jungle is even mentioned to be canon in this film. Before I rank this, I want to say one more thing too. I don't know why they put that there. In Creed 1, it's revealed Apollo won that rubber match spar with Rocky. I'll put it up here for now. Let's do the final ranking of where I'll put everything, and let's decide on a Z tier. Would I leave Rocky 5 down here? Yes. The work print here? Yes. Rocky versus Drago here? Yes. Is there anyone in S that I need to move down to A? No. I'm actually going to leave these here. I think this is a pretty consistent franchise for the most part. Is Creed 3 better than Creed 2? For me, I'm going to pick Creed 2. Is Creed 2 better than the first Creed? For me, yes, I would watch it before the first Creed, and I love the first Creed. Is Creed 2 better than Rocky Balboa? Which one would I personally want to watch before the other? I'm going to give Creed 2 the edge slightly. Would I watch Creed 2 before I watch the original Rocky? No. I think I would watch the original Rocky first. I'm going to leave it here. Would I watch the original Rocky before Rocky 2? No, I would not. I prefer Rocky 2. Do I prefer Rocky 3 to Rocky 2? I said earlier, yes. I'm going to stick with that. Yes, I do prefer Rocky 3 to Rocky 2 now. And Rocky 4, of course, is my personal favorite in the franchise, the theatrical cut. And with that being said, it is my personal Z tier. This is what my list looks like for the ranking of the Rocky films, the entire franchise. And I can't wait for Creed 4 to come out so I can judge where I will put that as well. The link to this tier list will be in the pinned comment and maybe even in the description. Thank you very much to F. She for creating this list. I hope I got your name right there. And thank you for watching this video. Again, you can do this list yourself. You can tag me on social media so I can see how you would rank things. Again, it's all subjective. Hope you enjoyed. This has been the Charles Jackson, author of the Boxing Encyclopedia. Go watch a Rocky movie. According to stats, somewhere in the world, someone's always watching a Rocky movie. I think I'll go watch one too. All right. See you in the next video.